Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. Iran fires almost 200 missiles at Israel. Most are intercepted by Israeli defenses, some by U.S. warships in the Middle East. President Joe Biden says the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. And he says, make no mistake, the U.S. is fully supportive of Israel. And he says the consequences for Iran are to be determined. Donald Trump, former president and Republican presidential candidate, says the Iran attack and the wars in general in the Middle East would never have happened had he been president. Over 20,000 dock workers at over a dozen ports on the U.S. East Coast go on strike. We'll talk with Politico reporter Ry Rivard about the union demands, how President Biden is approaching the strike, and the potential long-term effects on the economy. President Biden also getting an update on Hurricane Helene recovery efforts, saying he wants to jumpstart the process and it's going to cost billions of dollars. The only vice presidential candidates debate is tonight between Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Walz. We will hear from Tom LoBianco, 24-site News national politics reporter. And today is former President Jimmy Carter's 100th birthday. He gets birthday wishes from President Biden and former Presidents Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. Story from the Washington Post. Iran fired a barrage of missiles at Israel Tuesday, the country's military said in a statement, in what Tehran said was a retaliation for the killing of top figures in Hezbollah and Hamas. Sirens could be heard across Israel as people took shelter and streaks of flame lit up the skies. Authorities have since said the attack is over and Iran fired around 180 missiles. The Israeli Defense Forces said most were intercepted, but there were a few hits. Israeli military spokesman Daniel Hagari said several people were reported injured, but there were no known deaths. Strikes follow Israel's killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, a key Tehran ally, and the start of an Israeli ground incursion into southern Lebanon. That was reporting from the Washington Post. President Biden spoke about the attack at the start of his briefing at the White House on Hurricane Helene recovery.
Before I began, I wanted to say a few words about Iran's missile attack on Israel today. At my direction, the United States military actively supported the defense of Israel, and we're still assessing the impact. But based on what we know now, the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. And this is testament to Israeli military capability and U.S. military. It's also a testament to intensive planning between the United States and Israel to anticipate and defend against the brazen attack we expected. Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel. And I've been spent the morning and part of the afternoon in the Situation Room and meeting with my whole national security team and consulting with the Israelis indirectly because in terms of their impact on us. And the national security team has been, as I said, in constant contact with Israeli officials and their counterparts, and is going to continue to be brought to me throughout the day. We're still out to share updates when we get them, and we will do that.
President Biden at the White House. That was the start of a briefing on a different subject. When that briefing was over, reporters asked him a couple of questions about the attack by Iran on Israel.
What is your message to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and have you spoken with him today?
I haven't spoken with him. We have spoken with all his people, and I'll be talking to him, and my message will depend on what we finally conclude is needed.
What do you believe the consequences for Iran should be?
That remains to be seen. Thank you.
President Biden at the White House. Earlier in the day, the White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan spoke to reporters in the White House briefing room.
Today, Iran launched nearly 200 ballistic missiles towards targets in Israel. The United States military coordinated closely with the Israeli Defense Forces to help defend Israel against this attack. U.S. naval destroyers joined Israeli air defense units in firing interceptors to shoot down inbound missiles. President Biden and Vice President Harris monitored the attack and the response from the White House Situation Room, joined in person and remotely by their national security team. We are still working with the IDF and the authorities in Israel to assess the impact of the attack. But at this time, and I stress at this time, we do not know of any deaths in Israel. We are tracking the reported death of a Palestinian civilian in Jericho in the West Bank. We do not know of any damage to aircraft or strategic military assets in Israel. In short, based on what we know at this point, This attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. This was first and foremost the result of the professionalism of the IDF, but in no small part because of the skilled work of the U.S. military and meticulous joint planning in anticipation of the attack. We are also aware of reports of a terrorist attack in Jaffa that took the lives of a number of Israeli civilians and wounded several others today. Our condolences go out to the families of the victims and to the family of the Palestinian civilian in Jericho. Obviously, my update here is based on early reports, and we reserve the right to amend and adjust as necessary as we gather more information. The word fog of war was invented for a situation like this. This is a fluid situation. We will consult with the Israelis on next steps in terms of the response and how to deal with what Iran has just done, and we will continue to monitor for further threats and attacks from Iran and its proxies. We are particularly focused on protecting U.S. service members in the region.
The White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan speaking to reporters in the White House briefing room. Iran's mission to the United Nations, writing on X that the missile attack is a legal, rational, and legitimate response to the terrorist acts of the Zionist regime, and should the Zionist regime dare to respond or commit further acts of malevolence, a subsequent and crushing response will ensue. And Hamas releasing a statement, we express our pride in our brothers in the Islamic Republic of Iran and our appreciation for their stand in the face of the unbridled Zionist arrogance. Jake Sullivan also at the White House asked about what the U.S. would recommend to Israel be the response.
What is the U.S. view on whether Israel should retaliate, and what is your concern about this leading to a wider escalation of war in the region?
We've had some initial discussions with the Israelis in the aftermath of this at the military level and also at the White House to Prime Minister's office level. We'll continue those conversations in the hours ahead. I'm not going to prejudge or get ahead of anything. We want to have some deep consultations with the Israelis, and I'll have more to report to you after we get the opportunity for deeper discussions.
And escalation in the region?
Obviously, this is a significant escalation by Iran, a significant event, and it is equally significant that we were able to step up with Israel and create a situation in which no one was killed in this attack in Israel, so far as we know at this time. We are now going to look at what the appropriate next steps are to secure, first and foremost, American interests, and then to promote stability to the maximum extent possible as we go forward.
Jake Sullivan is National Security Advisor to President Biden, briefing reporters at the White House. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres writing on X, I condemn the broadening of the Middle East conflict with escalation after escalation. This must stop. We absolutely need a ceasefire. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, a spokesperson for the IDF, putting a video out saying that Israel will respond at the time and place of its choosing.
Iran launched a large-scale attack of over 180 ballistic missiles directly from Iranian soil at the State of Israel. There were a small number of hits in the center of Israel and some other hits in the southern Israel. The majority of the incoming missiles were intercepted by Israel and a defensive coalition led by the United States. Iran's attack is a severe and dangerous escalation. There will be consequences. Our defensive and offensive capabilities are at the highest levels of readiness. Our operational plans are ready. We will respond wherever, whenever, and however we choose, in accordance with the directive of the government of Israel. Iran and its proxies have been attacking Israel since the 7th of October on 7 fronts. Iran and its proxies seek the destruction of Israel. The Israel Defense Forces will continue doing everything necessary to defend the state of Israel and protect the people of Israel.
Daniel Hagari is a spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Force, posting that video. From Yahoo Finance, oil prices spiked on Tuesday after Iran fired a series of ballistic missiles at Israel, pushing prices the highest level in nearly 1 year. At the Pentagon, the press secretary, Rear Admiral Pat Ryder, said that U.S. destroyers in the eastern Mediterranean Sea helped shoot down the missiles that Iran fired at Israel.
Iran conducted a significant attack against Israel today, launching approximately 200 ballistic missiles, targeting several locations in Israel. We condemn these reckless attacks by Iran, and we call on Iran to halt any further attacks, including from its proxy forces. During the attack, the U.S. military coordinated closely with the Israeli Defense Forces to help defend Israel. U.S. Navy destroyers deployed to the Middle East region supported the defense of Israel by firing approximately a dozen interceptors against the incoming Iranian missiles. Initial reports indicate that Israel was able to intercept the majority of incoming missiles and that there was minimal damage on the ground, but I'd refer you to Israel for confirmation and any questions on that as they're in a better position to discuss. Please note that we're still assessing the attack and the outcome, so numbers may change as we receive updates. Additionally, no U.S. personnel were injured or harmed during the Iranian missile attack. Secretary Austin, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General C.Q. Brown Jr., and U.S. Central Command Commander General Eric Kurilla have been in constant contact with President Biden and Vice President Harris throughout the day to consult on the situation and U.S. actions. In addition to his phone call earlier this morning with Israeli Minister of Defense Gallant prior to the Iranian attack, Secretary Austin spoke to the minister again just a short while ago to get an update. He reaffirmed the United States' ironclad commitment to the defense of Israel and underscored that the U.S. remains well-postured throughout the Middle East region to protect U.S. forces and defend Israel in the face of threats from Iran and Iran-backed terrorist organizations. We'll provide a readout of that call as soon as possible. To be crystal clear, as Secretary Austin has said, should Iran, its partners, or its proxies use this moment to target American personnel or interests in the region, the United States will take every necessary measure to defend our people.
The Pentagon Press Secretary, Rear Admiral Pat Ryder, opening up today's news conference at the Pentagon. And over at the State Department, spokesperson Matthew Miller asked about Americans and U.S. diplomatic property in Israel.
In terms of what happened in Israel, there no damage to any U.S. facilities, no injuries, no nothing.
At this time, we are not aware of any damage to U.S. facilities. As you know, we issued an order earlier today for our personnel, State Department personnel in Israel, to shelter at their homes. We have full accountability for all our personnel. We're not aware of any civilian casualties inside Israel, let alone an American citizen casualty. There is one report of a Palestinian who died in the West Bank, but no damage to any U.S. facility either.
State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller at his news conference in Washington. Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, the minority leader, putting out a statement. Israel has a right to defend itself against terrorists bent on destroying it. The United States must stand with our friend under fire. The Biden administration, he writes, has repeatedly threatened Iran with severe consequences for its campaign of terror against Israel and the United States, but failed to impose them. It has pledged ironclad support for Israel only to delay and withhold the security assistance that would give this pledge any weight. And Donald Trump, Republican presidential nominee and former president, writing on Truth Social, look at the world today. Look at the missiles flying right now in the Middle East. Look at what's happening with Russia, Ukraine. Look at inflation destroying the world. None of this happened while I was president. And in a separate post, he writes, this war was totally preventable. It should never have happened. If I were president, it would not have happened. He expounded on that today at a rally in Wisconsin.
The world right now is spiraling out of control. You might not have seen what's happened because it was a few hours ago. A lot of people were here. There's so many people outside, which we appreciate. But a lot of people were here a short time ago. Iran launched 181 ballistic missiles at Israel, and I've been talking about World War III for a long time, and I don't want to make predictions because the predictions always come true. We're not going to make, but they are very close to global catastrophe. We have a non-existent president and a non-existent vice president who should be in charge, but nobody knows what's going on. She was at a fundraiser in San Francisco, a city that she totally destroyed, by the way. San Francisco was the best city in the country maybe 20 years ago, and today you can't even go there. You can't even live there. And I speak against myself because I own property there. I shouldn't be saying that. I should say it's the greatest place in the world. Let's sell my property. But I say it's, I don't know, maybe it stages a comeback, but it's literally not livable. And 20 years ago, it was the best city in the country, probably one of the best cities anywhere in the world. But they, she was caught yesterday on an airplane staging a fake photo op. Did you see that with the telephone? The only problem is she didn't have the phone plugged in. You know, she's talking on the phone. The phone is not plugged in. She's talking like she's working. You know, I'm working so hard. Oh, boy, what a group. What a group.
Donald Trump, former president and Republican presidential nominee, campaigning today in Wisconsin. And Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, made a statement about Iran's missile attack on Israel. The vice president was in Washington.
So today, Iran launched approximately 200 ballistic missiles at Israel in a reckless and brazen attack. I condemn this attack unequivocally. I'm clear-eyed. Iran is a destabilizing, dangerous force in the Middle East, and today's attack on Israel only further demonstrates that fact. Earlier today, I was in the Situation Room with President Biden and our national security team as we monitored the attack in real time and ensured that the protection of U.S. personnel in the region is paramount. I fully support President Biden's order for the U.S. military to shoot down Iranian missiles targeting Israel, just as we did in April. We are still assessing the impact, but initial indications are that Israel, with our assistance, was able to defeat this attack. Our joint defenses have been effective, and this operation and successful cooperation saved many innocent lives. As I have said, I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist militias. My commitment to the security of Israel is unwavering. And let us be clear, Iran is not only a threat to Israel, Iran is also a threat to American personnel in the region, American interests, and innocent civilians across the region who suffer at the hands of Iran-based and backed terrorist proxies. We will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend U.S. forces and interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists. And we will continue to work with our allies and partners to disrupt Iran's aggressive behavior and hold them accountable. Thank you.
Madam Vice President, how do you prevent this from spilling over to... President Trump called this potentially part of World War III. Should they retaliate?
Vice President Kamala Harris, Democratic presidential nominee, making that statement today in Washington. This is Washington Today. From Reuters, NATO's new chief, Mark Rutte, voiced strong support for Ukraine on Tuesday and said he was not worried about the upcoming U.S. election as he could work with former President Donald Trump or Vice President Kamala Harris. Rutte, a former Dutch prime minister, took over from Jan Stoltenberg as NATO Secretary General just weeks before the November 5th U.S. presidential vote that pits Democrat Harris against Republican Trump, who's been highly critical of NATO. That was from Reuters. Here's a question to Mark Rutte at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium.
Lily Bayer from Reuters. Mark Rutte, I have a question. You're coming into office just ahead of a key U.S. election. Are you concerned about the possible impact of that election on alliance unity, especially when it comes to Ukraine? And what are you going to do to keep the alliance together if there are a diversity of views on how to help Ukraine?
I'm not worried. I know both candidates very well. I worked for 4 years with Donald Trump. He was the one pushing us to spend more, and he achieved. Because indeed, at the moment, we are now at a much higher spending level than we were when he took office early in 2017. And he was also pushing us on China. And I think he was right there. Of course, Kamala Harris has a fantastic record as vice president. She is a highly respected leader. So I will be able to work with both. Whatever is the outcome of the elections. And of course, I cannot vote, so we'll see what happens.
Mark Rutte at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, at a ceremony on his first day as the new Secretary General of NATO, the 14th Secretary General since the military alliance was created in 1949. He said his top 3 priorities are dealing with the war in Ukraine, increasing military readiness of NATO, and expanding NATO's worldwide alliances. Back in the U.S., turning to the economy from CBS News, thousands of dock workers at ports from New England to Texas went on strike just after midnight on Tuesday as they rally for higher pay and more job security. The work stoppage, the first at East and Gulf Coast ports since 1977, follows a lengthy impasse in labor talks between the International Longshoremen's Association and the United States Maritime Alliance. a shipping industry group representing terminal operators and ocean carriers. The ILA is demanding sizable wage hikes and a complete ban on the use of automated cranes, gates, and container-moving trucks in unloading or loading freight. The ports affected by the strike handle roughly half of the country's ship cargo. Experts say the economic impact of a prolonged work stoppage could be steep, potentially raising the cost of consumer goods and creating shortages ahead of the holidays. That was the article from CBS News. The ILA president, Harold Daggett, was interviewed by Fox News on the picket line at the port in Newark, New Jersey.
You are going to grind the economy to a halt here on the East Coast and the Gulf Coast.
No, not us. They are. Don't spin it now because you're Fox News. They're going to drive it.
But are you worried?
They're going to drive it.
Are you worried that this strike...
They have the capital to settle this thing.
Are you worried that this strike is going to hurt the everyday American, the farmers that need to reach the export market? They're telling me that they're going to hurt through all of this.
Now you start to realize who the longshoremen are, right?
Nobody cares.
People never gave a about us until now, when they finally realized that the chain is being broke now. Cars won't come in. Food won't come in. Clothing won't come in. You know how many people depend on our jobs? Half the world. And it's time for them and time for Washington to put so much pressure on them to take care of us, because we took care of them and we're here 135 years and brought them where they are today, and they don't want to share.
Harold Daggett is president of the International Longshoremen's Association, the union representing dock workers, speaking to Fox News in Newark, New Jersey. President Joe Biden putting out a statement: collective bargaining is the best way for workers to get the pay and benefits they deserve. I have urged USMX, which represents a group of foreign-owned carriers, to come to the table and present a fair offer to the workers of the ILA that ensures they are paid appropriately in line with their invaluable contributions. And during today's White House briefing, the Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was asked about the president's positions.
When it comes to the dock workers strike, should Americans be prepared for shortages of goods?
So, look, I know that there's been a lot of reporting on that, on the impact that this will have on the economy. And so, look, what we see and how we see this moving forward as it relates to the economy and potential impacts is that we're going to continue closely monitoring the situation. We're going to what this could have potentially on the supply chain impacts, assessing ways to address any concerns if necessary, and the president and the vice president, as I said at the top as well, are being briefed. They were briefed on the agency assessments that show limited impacts on critical consumer needs at this time, including in the important areas of fuel, food, and medicine. And so the president has directed. Remember, he started the supply chain disruption task force very early on to deal with what we saw related to the pandemic. And so they're going to meet every day. This task force still exists. They're going to meet every day and prepare to address potential disruptions if necessary. And so we are engaged extensively with labor industry, state and local officials, ocean carriers, and rail and truck companies, including multiple meetings with retailers, grocers, manufacturers, and agriculture. So this is something, when it comes to the supply chain, as we obviously, as I just mentioned, the president started the task force. We are taking this very seriously, and we're going to monitor this very closely.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at her news conference at the White House. An article at Politico begins: the White House on Tuesday doubled down on its stance that it won't force striking dock workers back on the job and insisted that impacts to America's vital goods will be minimal for now. The key phrase is for now. One of the reporters on that story is Ry Rivard, who joins us now by phone. Thanks for being with us. Let's start with that power the president has to end the strike. What is it, and what are they saying about why he won't use it at this point?
The president has power under the 1947 Taft-Hartley Act to put workers back to work that are on strike or prevent strikes. It's a little bit more complicated a process than that, but it essentially, undermines a union's leverage in a situation like this. And so the president, who says he's one of the most pro-union presidents and has one of the most pro-union administrations in history, isn't going to cut the knees off from a union while they're in a very tense and obviously, gone on strike labor negotiation.
You write as well that there are some who are calling on him to do this.
Yeah, I mean, industry groups that are concerned about the effect on the economy, and others say, the president really needs to get involved to make sure the supply chain isn't significantly disrupted, which a prolonged strike would do. I think there's some debates over what prolonged is, and a lot of different economists have a lot of different views. But basically, if you're wondering if you're going to have toilet paper, the answer is yes. But if the strike goes on for a while, things could, be off store shelves eventually.
This is day one. The union sounds like they do plan to strike until the effects are felt. How could this play out?
We're a little unsure. The union has a very blustery and fiery leader who has been talking about going on strike for over a year. This union is of dock workers who load and unload cargo at ports on the eastern seaboard and in the Gulf of Mexico, and so has a significant amount of leverage over the coming and going of goods. And so, he's using that leverage right now to look for, what I think many people would consider very significant raises in the neighborhood of 60 or 70% over the life of this 6-year contract. The last offer on the table from the industry group that represents the shipping industry was, according to that group, close to 50% over 6 years. So, he wants significant benefits for his workers. He says that shipping companies have been doing quite well and making record profits, but his people haven't seen a big, part of that pie.
We're talking with Politico reporter Ry Rivard. How historic is this? Has a strike like this happened in the U.S. in the past?
On the East Coast, there hasn't been a strike of this union, the International Longshoremen's Association, since 1977. It lasted about 2 weeks when that happened. But on the West Coast, there's a similar but different union that represents dock workers in Los Angeles and other ports along the West Coast. And they've had a number of labor disruptions. In fact, in 2002, George W. Bush, then president, did use the Taft-Hartley Act, or his powers under that act, to try and bring workers back to work and reach a settlement. Typically, if you've been following labor issues along the ports, which not many people have, which is why the strike is sort of taking a lot of people off guard, the East Coast has been considered more stable and the West Coast more strike prone, and obviously that has very suddenly changed this week.
We are a couple of weeks away from an election. How does the timing affect what is happening and the pressures on everyone?
It's a nightmare scenario, I think, for any White House, but particularly for a Democratic White House that needs, heading into a very close election. The president is in a very difficult position. He needs people to feel good about the economy, to support Vice President Harris's campaign for president. But he also needs labor unions. She needs labor unions and workers to support her campaign and show up for on election day. And so this strike pits those two things against each other. Even if the economy isn't significantly hurt, but people feel like it's hurt and hurting and blame her for it, that could be a big problem. But if they in the White House somehow offends labor unions and labor stays home on election day, that's a big problem too. So it's just a very difficult situation, which is why I can't imagine they're not hoping this isn't over very soon.
Ry Rivard is a reporter with Politico. Find his articles at Politico.com and on X at Ry Rivard. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wall Street today, the Dow down 173, NASDAQ down 278, S&P down 53. Washington today continues in a moment.
Listening to programs on C-SPAN through C-SPAN Radio is easy. Tell your smart speaker, play C-SPAN Radio, and listen to Washington Journal daily at 7 a.m. Eastern. Important public affairs events throughout the day. And weekdays, catch Washington Today. Listen to C-SPAN anytime. Just tell your smart speaker, play C-SPAN Radio. C-SPAN, powered by cable. Welcome back to Washington Today. It's available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Thousands of federal personnel are deployed across the United States to respond to Helene, a widespread and historically devastating disaster, FEMA officials said in a Tuesday news briefing.
That article was from CNN. It continues, in all, there are 3,500 federal personnel helping with Hurricane Helene recovery across several states, including 1,000 people from the Federal Emergency Management Agency and 1,250 people with urban search and rescue teams, according to the Director of Individual Assistance at FEMA. FEMA has provided 1.9 million meals, 1 million liters of water, 95,000 tarps, 150 ambulances, and 30 generators to areas affected by the storm, he added. Again, all from CNN. President Biden got an update at the White House today about relief efforts.
My top priority, and I mean this sincerely because we've been through a lot of these, my top priority is to ensure the communities devastated by this hurricane get the help and support they need as quickly as possible. As quickly as possible. As we watch the storm from the Gulf region form, I also directed FEMA to redeploy a substantial number of assets and resources to ensure we're ready to deal with what we expected and to support all the folks in need. We had over 1,000 federal personnel, including search and rescue teams, at the ready on the ground before it hit. Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama became the staging ground for responders throughout the entire region. With 2.7 million meals, nearly 2 million liters of water ready to be distributed before the hurricane hit. I immediately approved emergency declarations as soon as I received the requests from the governors or the state officials. Still, with all this preparation, this was a hurricane of unprecedented and historic proportions. Over the past several days, I've been in regular contact with the governors, the mayors, the county officials, in all affected areas. That includes Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and Virginia. Now, in the storm's wake, I've directed my team, including the leadership of key departments and agencies all across the government, to send every, and I mean this seriously, every available resource that we have at our disposal to the affected region. And that's why we're here today with the cabinet and those acting in the cabinet, because some are deployed already. The Department of Defense, Agriculture, HHS, Transportation, Energy, Homeland Security, EPA, Commerce, Small Business Association, and the U.S. Army with the Corps of Engineers. We need to be all working together, and that's what we're going to talk about, that continued coordination we have going. I've been in frequent contact with the governors and other leaders in the impacted areas, and we have to jumpstart this recovery process. People are scared to death. People wonder whether they're going to make it. We still haven't heard from a whole lot of people. This is urgent. People have to know how to get the information they need. So we'll be there until this work is done. It's going to cost, I predict to you, I don't have a number. I think it's going to cost billions of dollars to restore these areas to where they were before. Until the work is done, we're going to stay. I'm going to, as I said, Congress needs to make sure that states have every available resource. And we have an obligation. This is a storm of historic proportion. Nothing like this has happened in the region since the turn of the 20th century. I think the last was, 1914, 1916, in that range. So that's what we're here to discuss, the detail of how we get all that's needed, and it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a long haul to restore these communities. And I'm going to be heading down anyway, I'll be in the region on Wednesday. And we've had people down there already. It's just going to be this is really consequential. Homes come home, they're just washed away. Entire roads washed up, cliffs. I mean, it's just devastating. And so it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of coordination. And if this were in the middle of the term, I'd be asking Congress to prepare they haven't given me the money we need now for this materials that we need for dealing with these devastating storms. It's going to cost them, that's okay. It's probably, is that the speaker calling me? I said he's in, right? Anyway, so we're gonna now have our cabinet meeting, and thank you all for being here.
President Joe Biden in the White House Roosevelt Room before that interagency briefing on Hurricane Helene response and recovery. He will be in North Carolina on Wednesday. And also word that Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, will be in Georgia and North Carolina in the coming days. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, posting on X, it is imperative that Congress reconvene to pass a supplemental aid package for the damage done to the southeast by Hurricane Helene, and also to provide missile defense assistance to Israel, which is under attack from the Iranian regime. We need to help our people at home and stand with our allies abroad, Senator Graham writes. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper spoke about hurricane recovery efforts as well today.
We know that the devastation brought by Hurricane Helene is beyond belief. Communities were wiped off the map. Dozens of lives lost. Hundreds of roads remain damaged or impassable. Communication has been difficult due to cell phone and power outages. Many people were waiting for days trying to get in touch with loved ones, and thankfully many of them have, but some of them are still waiting. Access to water is difficult for many people. Across the region, more than 460,000 customers are without power, down from a peak of more than 1 million. More than 1,100 people are being housed in 29 shelters. We're working together to open more major routes to push supplies forward while repairing roads, utilities, and communications. I-40 east from Asheville is now open, and I-40 west into Asheville will be opening this morning. But we continue to ask people to stay off the roads in western North Carolina unless travel is necessary. It's still dangerous on many roads, and your presence can impede rescue and recovery efforts that are underway. We're continuing to urge and help cell phone carriers to get cell phone service back up, and it's steadily returning. Utility companies are also working around the clock to get power back on. Yesterday, I went to the staging area in Asheville where our National Guard has been deploying to western North Carolina counties hundreds of thousands of pounds of food, water, and other supplies. Those life-saving items are helping people across the entire region, including airlifts to communities that are not reachable by road. FEMA is working with us on the ground, in addition to other help. They've delivered about 1 million liters of water and more than 600,000 meals to North Carolina so far. The North Carolina Department of Transportation is working to reopen more roads, first by clearing debris and finding ways around major damage until repairs can be made. And we're grateful to the dozens of states and federal teams that have sent line workers, equipment, supplies, swiftwater rescue teams that, along with local, state, and National Guard, have rescued hundreds of people and many pets. I've briefed President Biden and Vice President Harris each on 2 occasions, and they have committed every resource available to this recovery.
North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, Democrat, speaking today in North Carolina. An article from Investors Business Daily says that Moody's Analytics on Monday projected the price tag of Hurricane Helene is in the $20 billion to $34 billion range, with property damage ranging from $15 billion to $26 billion. The first and only vice presidential debate is tonight between Governor Tim Walz, Democrat of Minnesota, and Senator J.D. Vance, Republican of Ohio. C-SPAN's preview program begins at 8 p.m. Eastern. The debate itself is at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll have a live simulcast. It's in New York City, moderated by Margaret Brennan and Nora O'Donnell of CBS News, running about 90 minutes. And when it's over, about 10:30 p.m. Eastern, we'll get your reaction by phone and text. No audience, microphones not muted when the other candidate is speaking, but CBS does reserve the right to start muting if they deem it is necessary. C-SPAN spoke this morning with Tom LoBianco, 24 Site News co-founder and national politics reporter.
So what are the stakes for tonight's debates for each of the candidates?
Well, I'd say for Vance, they're a little bit higher than they are for Walz going into this. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Some of that has to do with their relative positions on the ticket. There's not a lot of expectation that these things will actually move numbers one way or another for the top of the ticket. But a lot of this has to do about their futures. And J.D. Vance, of course, is very young. He's 39, 40 years old, has a political future. The top of his ticket, Trump, is the oldest candidate in the race. And if there were something to happen, it would seem to be most likely that Vance would be the one to advance forward to the top of the ticket or to the Oval Office itself. So I would say the stakes are a lot higher for Vance here.
And what do we know about each of the candidates' debate style and how they've been preparing for the debate?
Well, I think you're going to see a lot of this so-called Midwest nice, which is is kind of a passive-aggressive way to stick the knife in. And Lord knows that both of these candidates have gone after each other. When Tim Walz started off with the Harris campaign, he was pressing a lot of rumors, demonstrably false rumors about Vance personally. And of course, Vance himself has pushed these, spurious rumors, the hoax about the people of Springfield, Ohio. And I think what you're going to see is it's going to be a lot different than the way Vice President Kamala Harris handled former President Donald Trump. I think you'll see them both go more directly at each other. One thing that's important to understand about Vance in particular and kind of his style as we see him on the campaign trail, he's a protege of Donald Trump Jr. And Donald Trump Jr. historically has been part of the Steve Bannon wing of the Republican Party, which is very combative, spreads a lot of hoaxes, fake news, and likes to just be very bombastic, almost in a more visceral way than Trump is. So I would expect to see a lot of fireworks up there.
And what are you going to be watching for tonight specifically?
Well, I will be watching to see if any flies land on any heads tonight, like the last one. I want to see how much each candidate is able to carry the water for the respective top of the ticket, especially for Tim Walz. Because, look, one of the criticisms of Harris through August and through much of this month was that she was not doing a lot of interviews. Well, she started to change that. She started to do more interviews. Vance himself has been prolific. I mean, he almost does the full Ginsburg on these, the Sunday shows routinely. He has done a ton of appearances. Walz, not so much. And I think we need to see, I'm going to be watching for how does he handle some of the tough policy questions? Is he able to parry shots coming in from J.D. Vance? I would not underestimate J.D. Vance. He's very good, or he seems to be very good from what we've seen reflexively. For Vance, I'm listening to how much does he stick with the Trump playbook versus how much does he project forward this quote new right policy that's out there, this Heritage Project 2025 kind of a post-conservatism, because he's the one who seems to have a clear future coming out of this, who could potentially run for president in 2028, depending upon how things shake out. For him, I'm going to be watching for how does he project his future.
Tom Lobianco, 24 Site News co-founder and national politics reporter. A C-SPAN interview on this morning's Washington Journal program. Again, tonight, C-SPAN's preview program of the debate is at 8 p.m. Eastern live, then a simulcast of the debate at 9 p.m. Eastern, set to run 90 minutes. So about 10:30 p.m. Eastern, we'll get your reaction by phone and text here on C-SPAN Radio, on C-SPAN Television, C-SPAN Now mobile app as well, and streamed at cspan.org. Of the 23 U.S. Senate seats currently held by Democrats that are on the ballot November 5th, only 2 are rated by the Cook Political Report as having a decent chance of being won by Republicans. West Virginia, it's an open seat, that's rated solid Republican. And Montana, where Senator Jon Tester is running for re-election, that's rated leans Republican. On Monday, Senator Tester debated his Republican opponent, businessman Tom Sheehy, in Missoula, Montana. After an hour of questions about housing costs, abortion, federal land use, fentanyl, foreign policy, and tribal issues, here are the closing statements by the candidates, starting with Senator Tester.
The voters out there that are watching this show, and hopefully you'll talk to your fellow friends, the decision here is stark. You got an opportunity to vote for a guy who's come to this state a few years back, bought himself a 37,000-acre ranch, which we didn't even get into, locked everybody off it, and now is charging $12,500 to go hunting on. a guy that wants to purely privatize healthcare, which would destroy the healthcare system in this state, a guy who's sat on a board of an organization and advocated himself to take the protections away from our public lands, which is the only reason I believe Montana is truly the last best place. And also a guy who wants to take away a woman's right to choose, that thinks he's in a better position to make that decision than the woman is, which would end up in not only taking freedoms away from Montanans in a way that's never been taken before, but it would eliminate doctors from coming to this state, would eliminate our recruitment of medical professionals from coming to this state. Or you got somebody like me, somebody who's been raised within 100 miles from where I was born, who will support public lands, support our healthcare system, support a woman's right to choose. November's coming. I'd appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Senator Tester. And a final closing thought from Mr. Sheehy.
Well, thank you, PBS, and thank you again, Senator Tester, for coming and for your decades of service to the nation and to the state. America's at a crossroads. We're facing unprecedented challenges across the board, from record inflation to a wide open border to global security challenges that are threatening our very way of life. It's time for a new generation of leadership. It's time to actually solve these problems and stop talking about them. I'm not going to go through the list of inaccurate things the senator just said. I'll let the fact checkers speak for themselves. Truth is, I wasn't lucky enough to be born in Montana. I sure would have loved to have been. Couldn't control where my mother's womb was when I crawled out of it. I couldn't control when the military sent me for a decade. But I'm proud to say that when my wife and I left the service, we put down roots here. We started a company, created hundreds of jobs, and have tried to invest in the betterment of our community. And I'm running for this office not because I personally desire to be a politician. I'd much rather be at home with my 4 kids or water bombing fires. But the truth is, I'm concerned about where our country's heading. And I think it's time for a new generation of leaders to step up and try to start fixing some of these problems and stop talking about them. We have some very serious issues to deal with, and we need serious people to deal with them. Senator Tester's been in office many years. I thank him for his service. He also voted to impeach Donald Trump twice. Said on CNN we should punch him in the face. He voted with Biden and Harris every single time it mattered, voted against all Supreme Court judge nominees that came from the Trump administration, and has advocated to end the filibuster and expand the Supreme Court. The very structure of our constitutional republic is at stake this November. Control of the U.S. Senate is at stake on November 5th. Montanans have a tremendous responsibility on their shoulders to preserve our republic and take America back. I humbly ask for your vote. I've spent my life serving this country, and I hope to do so for another 6 years. Thank you.
Tim Sheehy, Republican nominee for U.S. Senate in Montana, debating the Democratic incumbent going for a third term, Jon Tester, happened in Missoula on Monday, hosted by Montana PBS. There will be 2 other candidates for U.S. Senate on the ballot in Montana next month, a Libertarian and one from the Green Party. They did not meet the qualifications to participate in the debate. A video posted on X by the U.S. Naval Academy, and they write, "We wish a happy 100th birthday to President James Earl Carter Jr., class of 47.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, President Carter. Happy birthday to you."
President Carter was the 39th president. They write, Commander-in-Chief, President Carter's legacy is forever cemented as the ultimate example of our mission to develop our nation's leaders. Associated Press article includes this. This is the first time an American president has lived a full century, and the latest milestone in a life that took the Depression-era farmer's son to the White House and across the world as a Nobel Peace Prize-winning humanitarian and advocate for democracy. The Carter Center put out a video with messages from President Joe Biden and former presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton.
Mr. President, on behalf of the entire Biden family and the American people, happy 100th birthday.
Happy birthday, and have a wonderful evening.
To my fellow President Jimmy Carter, happy 100th birthday.
Have a happy birthday, friend.
Mr. President, you've always been a moral force for our nation and the world.
I have always admired President Carter for many things. His accomplishments in the White House, his incredible impact since leaving office, his fundamental decency.
You've had a heck of a life, and you're surrounded by people who love you.
And for the last 40-plus years, he's shown us just how much a former president can accomplish, from promoting democracy and honest elections to combating disease and advancing peace.
Your commitment to a better world and your unwavering belief in the power of human goodness continues to be a guiding light for all of us.
So, Jimmy, thank you for your friendship, your example, and for always finding new ways to remind us that we are all created in God's image.
May you have peace of mind and peace in your heart.
Thanks for your extraordinary example of service that has moved millions here in America and all around the world.
May God continue to bless you, Mr. President. You've been a good friend.
A video from the Carter Center with President Joe Biden and former Presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. The Associated Press article on today's 100th birthday of Jimmy Carter also has this: living the last 19 months in home hospice care, the 39th president keeps defying expectations, just as he did through a remarkable rise from his family peanut farming and warehouse business to the world stage. The Democrat served one presidential term from 1977 to 1981, and then for 4 decades led the Carter Center, which he and his wife Rosalind co-founded in 1982 to wage peace, fight disease, and build hope. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. You can sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.